Good afternoon, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Make Saints podcast. I'm Drew Downs, and this one is called How to Misunderstand with Great Effort. This is not an episode about misunderstanding itself. This is an episode about how the art of misunderstanding on purpose, like working really hard to misunderstand someone, or worse, keep the misunderstanding going. Because a lot of our stuff, right? There's a lot of misunderstanding going around, just in general, I think. And but there's some work that we put into wanting to misunderstand, wanting to be misunderstood. I don't think we're always on the same page about trying to understand each other. Now, I don't know if you've been around. It's mid-August 2024 as I'm recording this, and I don't know if you've been paying attention, but the last couple weeks we've had the Olympics. And this is a thing in which you can expect when you get people from all over the world to come to one place in Paris this time and speaking all these different languages, to expect that misunderstanding won't happen is kind of a strange idea. You can expect there to be some confusion, some misunderstanding to happen. I think some people worked really hard this year to misunderstand each other, though. I think there was some real activity in the misunderstanding field. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that one. But this came to mind anyway. This was already on my mind, and so as I was getting ready this week to preach for the first time in a few weeks, I was like, oh, hey, I've got this example. And when I went to write out the example, thinking I could describe this in a couple of sentences and post this, or I could do some, I was like, no, this is taking too long. So this is a background that we have to work through. So I thought, let's do a podcast instead. So here we are talking about misunderstanding with great effort. Now this starts, let's start not with the Olympics, but that's the example. Let's start with scripture. And we're, if you are someone who follows the lectionary, we've been in John 6 for the last 3 weeks. We're in it again this week. If you're not into the lectionary, if you're not super into scriptural stuff, believe me, just listen for a second. It'll be worth it. But what we have in John 6 is the big miracle, the most famous of miracles that don't involve resurrection. And that's Jesus and the disciples turning 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread into enough to feed the multitudes, to feed over 5,000 people. It's a big deal. And so this happens, and after they feed them all, and Jesus gets the disciples to collect 12 baskets worth of stuff to bring with them to keep feeding people, because that's the point. And so he sends them across the water, and the multitudes are like, hey, let's go too. Now there aren't enough boats, so they're like, okay, well, let's run. So they run along the shoreline, I guess, and beat the disciples to the other shore. And they're there when the disciples arrive, and they're like, hey, we're here. Let's do some more of that. And Jesus rebukes them because they are following for the wrong reason. He says that they're following because of the bread. Now, I think this is important for particularly for American Christians, particularly American evangelical Christians, to wrestle a little bit with this idea. But maybe you were raised in a church that was like, just go to church, and you're fine. And you have to wrestle with this idea that Jesus calls out most of the people following him as not good followers because they're trying to get something out of it. Maybe you were told that if you went to church and believed the right way, you'd go to heaven. Jesus seems to be saying, hey, you're doing it for the wrong reason. Maybe you shouldn't even do it at all. That's a head trip, right? That's a head trip for people who really, really want to collect people for Jesus, or who were raised in a world in which they didn't have to think too hard about it. You just do this thing and you're gonna be fine. Both of those sorts of ideas seem to not be what Jesus is talking about. Jesus is actually saying, you're sitting here hoping to get fed when the mission is to do the feeding. Yikes, right? Talk about misunderstanding. Well, then there are some other people who misunderstand Jesus. That's not just these thousands of people following him. It's these people who are intentionally trying to misunderstand him. And rather than perpetuate a historic misunderstanding of these people by repeating John's word for them, I'm going to just remind us that of this whole collection of spiritual people, there were a few among them that were critical of Jesus and were intentionally misunderstanding him with great effort. Yeah, so what do? They hear Jesus talk about this stuff, and Jesus offers them an image that he knows they will understand because they're not morons. He says, I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Now this is a double reference, right? So there's one. He was just rebuking those people for following him because he was giving them bread to eat. And now he's saying, guys, I'm the bread, right? So that's right top of mind, but he's making reference to the manna from heaven that comes from the Exodus story, Exodus 16. So go back, that's a historic reference that he's making. So he's like, guys, this is not about that. It is about something bigger. That's the wrong track. Focus on this. And this image, let's be honest, we all get it. We get this image. When Jesus says, I am the bread, this is what you're supposed to consume, we get it. Because we get images. This is how people think. When people say, I'm off like a rocket, you don't go, ooh, are you going to explode? Or if you say oh, I am racing to the store, you don't go, ooh, where's the race car? Is it an F1, is it an Indy car, or are you NASCARing it? People don't think like this. It is artificial to take this literally. You have to put effort into treating this as a literal statement. So, how do these critics respond to Jesus? They say, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? Now, we just sort of dismiss this as literalism, but they're doing this on purpose, and there's one real reason. There's only one reason why these critics would intentionally misunderstand Jesus this way, and that is to demean and mock him. Right? So you take this vision and you take his words literally and you throw them back in his face. Now, as I just said, we're not actually taking his words literally. What we're doing is we're taking the words and we're chopping off half of the meaning. We're chopping off half of the concept, and we're throwing that half in the garbage and pretending it doesn't exist. And we're taking the rest of it and playing dumb. Now, if you've been, if you've been alive in recent years, you might recognize examples of people doing this, where somebody takes someone else's words, reads them the most literal way possible, and then throws them back in their face and being like, look at this moron. He says we should do this, knowing full well that's not what he said or meant. There's we're trying to score political points. Politicians do this every day of the week. So you can just open up your analog newspaper, open up your digital newspaper over here, whatever, and you see it, and cable news full of it. So this is what we do. You're familiar with this concept. We are working hard to misunderstand each other on purpose to score political points. This is what we're doing. So I had this example that I wanted to use and it didn't work. And it came from Facebook. And it was somebody, this is a reference you probably will recognize, again, because you're alive and you're a sentient human being. And you were like, hey, what's with that Australian breakdancer? Now, there's somebody who is like, hey, I'm a researcher. I know you guys are fixated on how weird her dance is, but I thought we should research it and find out that she actually did win some contests. She won in 2021, 2022, 2023. Like she's been breakdancing professionally. Like this is actually a thing, and she's actually won her way to this place. So thinking that she's just some random rube out there doing ridiculous things, because she doesn't know what she's doing, doesn't it seem more likely that not only does she know what she's doing, but she did it on purpose, as a kind of protest? And when I read this and the fact that she scored 0 points, it reminded me of that scene from Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, or Into the Spider, whatever the first one was. And Miles it doesn't want to be at this fancy prep school. He wants to go back to his public school, and his teacher hands him his test, and says, "Why are you trying to fail?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm not trying to fail." And she was like, "You got 0 right." He was like, "Man, I must be dumb." And she was like, "No, there's only one way statistically you can get 0 right, and that's if you get them all right. Or it's 0, right? There's no way you can get them all wrong, is if you know what all of the right answers are." Like, it's statistically so unlikely. It is far more likely he understood them all. And so she shows him the paper, and she's like, you know them all. Stop pretending. That's what I thought of. It was like you have to work really hard to make that 0. And somebody brought up a response about cultural, from a cultural standpoint, whether she should be making that point. And so some of us got into this conversation. And rather than detail it all, I just want to name this sort of thing. So this person brought up a really vague question that could be understood in a variety of ways, and we sort of misunderstood her. But instead of trying to help us understand, this person just kept doubled down on not clarifying, avoiding our understanding, and then being dismissive in the end. like there's a way in which we think we're being like easy, like we're doing the easy work, or the fact is, like, you write, 6 words, like that's easier than writing 12, right? But it takes a lot of effort to keep people in the dark rather than just actually saying, oh, hey, I'm sorry you didn't understand, here's what I meant. Isn't it easier to just like deal with that? There's another example from the Olympics was in the opening ceremony when you had this Bacchanalian feast, celebrating Greek gods, and it was a display of all these Greek gods, and the Olympics being Greek, and these Christians, and it was not, and again I want to highlight, not Christians, it was a collection of Christians, and not just any collection of Christians, a particular subset of Christians. They were evangelicals primarily, and of evangelicals there is a further subset that is the charismatic evangelicals, and this is the group that is most common in these kinds of conversations. And this sort of sense of self-righteousness and victimhood, and they reacted as a mockery of Jesus and the Last Supper, and they just kept doubling down on the victimhood when even when there was an opportunity to say, oh, my bad, I'm sorry you misunderstood, I'm sorry I misunderstood, maybe we can figure something out. No, there's a lot of investment in getting it wrong. It's a political thing. That's the point. People are politically invested in misunderstanding, maintaining misunderstanding, and encouraging each other's misunderstanding, because there is political power in controlling those messages. There's political power in continuing to be misunderstood, to play the victim as the majority, right? We see this most especially in race, as a white majority pretends to be the victims, or the sort of powerful can pretend to be the victims of the powerless. This is itself a political activity. Misunderstanding with great effort is a political act intending to control. So, given all of this, given the Olympic spirit, given the fact that it's still technically summer, even as people are going back to school, which is ridiculous, even when it still hits 80 degrees outside in Indiana, even as the sun shines and gives me this deep, deep color on my skin. When I say deep, meaning slightly, not slightly less pale. I have this sense that there is another option here. There are other options for us than to performatively, politically misunderstand each other with great effort. We can choose to keep trying to understand. One of the things that I want to highlight as I wrap this up, I know this is a bit longer than normal, but I think this is important, that we are doing this work of understanding and recognizing that understanding is a two-part thing. That misunderstanding, that when one is performatively misunderstanding, you can't make them understand. And you therefore can't judge yourself for your ability to help them understand. If they're just going to keep doing this thing where they're not understanding, and they're going to choose to be the misunderstood person, and they're running around this way, why would you judge yourself? And that's the first thing. And then second of all, why would you allow them to judge you? There's nothing about this you can trust. There's nothing about this that makes any sense. There's nothing about this that is comprehensible, let alone rational. This is intentional. This is an intentional refusal to cooperate. So, as we're trying to figure out best ways to be, as we're trying to figure out how to live in this world, I want to encourage you to think of it not of this performative misunderstanding as something that you can fix, though maybe, if you see it in yourself, maybe wrestle with it a little bit more. But I would encourage us to think of it as the sort of corrective behavior we need is not about what you don't do. It's about figuring out the ways that we don't slip into those efforts at misunderstanding and find ourselves moving into spaces where understanding is more natural and we're more inclined to be the people we are called to be. So the antidote, the thing that I've been offering, it's not really an antidote, but it's really is a Jesus thing. By the way, it's a thing that I've been encouraging all my friends around here to think about throughout the summer, and that's just to eat with people. Get together with your friends, get together with your family, get together with anybody that you get together with, a stranger, and eat. Just eat. This is the glue that makes community work. Is you get together, you eat food, you laugh, you enjoy things. You taste new flavors, you share things you like with other people, and you just enjoy. You enjoy this world. You enjoy this community. You enjoy the people around you. And working with this as our sort of mission of the moment, all that stuff seems so dumb, doesn't it? Makes it all seem exactly what it is, which is performative, effort-filled misunderstanding. And you and I, we don't have time for that. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.